Let's turn to Revelation 5. There you go. All right, listen, it's only one more opportunity to sign up for a meal. Revelation 5. Just a little commercial, if I could. This coming Sunday morning and Sunday night will be, and I don't know if you've ever studied Revelation 12 before or not, but this may be one of the most important studies you've ever been involved in. Amen. Revelation 12:2. All right? And it has to deal with our minds and how we think. Very, very important. Okay? Revelation 5, we're looking at the book in heaven. And sometimes I like to ask up front if there's any carryover questions from the last study or two. Okay. I want you to start at chapter 1, if we could. Chapter 1, verse 19. Write the things which thou hast seen. What chapter is that? Chapter 1. Everybody understand that? Okay. And the things which are, where do we find that? And what is Revelation 2 and 3 dealing with? Okay. And then the last thing in verse 19, he says, and the things which shall be hereafter. So that last little section, has that happened yet? Okay, so we're still waiting on that. Okay, so we're still waiting on it, anticipating that. Okay, so that's the outline of the book of Revelation. We've made it through part 2. You've got the first part, which is the things which you've seen, the things which are, and we're living in that right now. That's the church age, Revelation 2 and 3, and then we come to the third division of the book of Revelation, which begins in chapter 4 and goes to the end of the book. So there's only 3 divisions of the book. But we start that new division, that third division, in chapter 4. Revelation 4 and 5 are introduction to the tribulation. Everybody good there? Revelation 4 and 5 are introduction to the tribulation period. We could say that Revelation 4 and 5 is preface to it. It's getting us ready for it. It's changing our perspective because we're in chapter 2 and 3, and then we want to move from chapter 2 and 3. And so we're changing that perspective, but it's introduction to the tribulation period. Now, Revelation 4 and 5, those 2 chapters each have a theme. And so the scene we have on earth in Revelation 2 and 3, and that's where we are right now. And so what the Lord is saying is, he says, John, I need you to come. You remember that in chapter 4, verse 1? He says, come up here. Remember that? He said, I need you to come up here. The reason he says, I need you to come up here is we're not going to look at this. We're not looking at the last division of Revelation from an earthly standpoint. I want you to see it from heaven's viewpoint. So I need you to come up here, and then we're going to talk about the tribulation period that's coming and the other events that are going to come off of that. So when he does that, in chapter 4, the theme of the whole chapter is the throne in heaven. Remember that? Okay. Pretty easy to see. You see it in verse 1, chapter 4. After this I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me. That goes back to the Revelation 1 voice. Remember that? Okay, so it's the first voice that I heard talking with me, which said, come up here, and I'll show you things which must be hereafter. By the way, the word must, you may remember this, is a little particle that means absolute necessity. It's got to happen. If it doesn't happen, guess where we are? Chapter 5, verse 4. What's the first 3 words? And I wept, and the next word is much. I wept much. See that there? So if we don't have the must of 4:1, if those things don't happen, then we're going to end up at 5:4, and we're just going to stop right there. And I wept much, and that's all it's going to be for here on out in eternity. Okay? So chapter 4 is the throne in heaven. Do you remember you've got the beasts? Where are they? No, where are they? What verse? Verse 7? Where else? 8. Okay, verse 7, chapter 4, the beasts. Well, no, okay, chapter 6, the 4 beasts full of eyes. See that there? Who are the beasts? That's a cherubim, right? Cherubim, we did all that work already. So let's just remember who they are. How about the 24 elders? You see them, verse 10, the 4 and 20 elders fall down. Who's that? That's representative of the church. Okay, so we've got angelic beings, and we also have the church that is in heaven. What are they doing? Worship. Yeah, verse 9, 10, 11. They're worshiping, right? Yeah, that is part of it, yeah. Oh, by the way, since she brought that up, what are crowns for? They are capacity to worship. The more crowns you have, the greater capacity you have to worship. They're not for wearing. You're not going to have 35 crowns balanced on your head walking around heaven. Okay, that's not what they're for. Crowns are not for wearing. Crowns are for casting. We're going to cast them at the feet of Jesus. It's capacity to worship. And so I want you to think of the implications if you don't have a crown. Wouldn't be good, would it? Wouldn't be very healthy. Revelation 5, what is the theme there? 4's the throne. The book. Yeah, Revelation 5. We've got a book in heaven. So we left off last week at verse 5 and 6. But let's start at verse 1. I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. So the scroll is sitting where? The book is a scroll. It's literal. They didn't have books like we have. They had scrolls. Okay, and then what did we say about the Father's right hand? It's open. It's because the preposition is that the scroll is setting upon the Father's right hand, right? So he's holding it out. He wants somebody to come take it. Okay, so the scroll is there, and it's sitting on the Father's right hand. What do hands do? Hands do work, right? We do dishes with our feet or hands? We do it with our hands, right? If we're going to mow the grass or weed eat or whatever, we do our hand. We use our hands. We're going to do some construction stuff. We use our hands. Hands are for working. Okay, so the hand is out. It's open. There's a scroll sitting on top of it. And the idea is the Father is saying that there's work to do. We've got work to do. I need somebody to come and take this scroll that's able to do that. Now, remember, written on front and back. Back in those days, you didn't write on front and back. You couldn't write on the front and the back. You only wrote on the front and not on the back because you had the veins on the papyri running vertically, and your pen would get caught if you were writing. Okay, so this is an unusual way to say that we've got this scroll and we've got some writing on it on the front and the back. But the point is this: remember, Revelation is a picture book. So whenever we see something, especially like this is unusual, we want to look at that thing and say, okay, what am I being taught by this? I've got the hand. There's work to be done. There's a scroll sitting on it. My hand is open. It's sitting here. I need somebody to come take it. And in the scroll, there's writings on both the front and the back, which is unusual, which is saying that this is, in the scroll, is a full and complete account for what has to take place. The things that are going to have to take place during the tribulation. So you've got a full and complete account of what's going to start coming out of where? Where is the wrath going to come from? Heaven. Remember, he says in chapter 4, verse 1, come on up here. Then we're going to have the wrath come down out of heaven, down to earth, right? So this is the things that are going to come down out of heaven before, remember, premillennial, before the Lord returns. Okay? This is before. This is all going to happen. And then he's going to come before he does what? Sets up his kingdom. Okay? Don't get those things out of order. Now, also in verse 1, you've got this sevenfold, sealed with 7 seals, so a sevenfold division of the scroll, which is, oh, by the way, what is 7? Okay, the idea of completion. You got that a lot of times in Revelation. We'll point that out every time we come across it, but this is going to be a complete judgment. It's not going to leave any rock unturned, okay? It's going to be a complete judgment. Now, when you come down to verse 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're going to get a challenge. All right, we've got a scroll sitting on the Father's right hand. There's work that needs to be done. It's a complete idea with the 7, sealed 7 times. So we've got this scroll that's complete, but we've got a challenge. Verse 2, and I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice. Here's your challenge. Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? So what's the question in verse 2? Who's worthy, right? Who is worthy? The failure, verse 3, and no man. You know what the word no means? Always has. And no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able. So you got 2 ideas there. You got worthy and able, don't you? And you need them both. They're there for a reason, okay? So there's nobody, we can't find anybody worthy to do it. And we can't find anybody able to do it, to open the book, neither to look thereon. Verse 4. What was the result? Well, let's put an ad out. Let's see if we can find somebody. Let's run an ad in the paper. No, what did he? John says, I wept much. That is a scary proposition to say that we're going to have judgment. Does judgment have to be poured out on this earth before righteousness can come in? Absolutely. And where do we sit if righteousness doesn't come in? We're in a mess, aren't we? We're just going to continue on down the same road we're traveling down right now forever and ever and ever. All right, so we need to have that righteousness come in. And the prospect of not finding anybody worthy or not finding anybody able, John looks at that and he says in verse 4, he says, I wept much. And he tells you why. He says, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look upon it. All right? But doesn't end there, does he? Do we get some success? All right, verse 5, and one of the elders said to me, hey, sit up straight, stop weeping. Behold, in other words, take a look. He's probably pointing. He said, look right over here. Okay, so he says, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders stood a lion. Well, hang on. I thought he said verse 5, it was a lion. Is he confused? Verse 6? He looked, he said, I saw a lamb. Interesting. As it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. Now, look at verse 3 one more time. He says, and no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look upon it. That looks at everything and everybody without a view to Christ. That looks at everything and leaves Christ out of the equation. Because we can look at everything and we're never going to find anybody worthy. We can look at everybody and we're not going to find anybody worthy if we leave it at verse 3, are we? So that is looking at everything and everybody without a view to Christ. It's leaving Christ out. That's looking around other than Christ to try to find somebody to mete out judgment. You think there's anybody who can do it? Other than Christ. We leave Christ out. Is there anybody else that can mete out judgment, deal out judgment? No, not at all. Is there anybody else out there, if we're looking around when we leave Christ out, is there anybody else out there that can bring in righteousness? No, not at all. There's nobody can do that. That's the point. There is only one. And that's verse 3 and 4. There's only one. And no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look thereon. In fact, if you look at verse 4, and that's all he gives us, that's all we have to look forward to if we leave Christ out. It's continual weeping. That's all it is. By the way, if we die apart from Christ, what's it going to be? Do you get weekends off? No, you don't get a break. It's just 8 hours a day and you take shift turns? No, it's all the time. It never ends. It's continual weeping. Matter of fact, you leave out all the good stuff you get at the end of this book in Revelation 22 that talks about there's no more tears, there's no more goodbyes, there's no more sorrow, none of that. But if you stick at verse 3 and 4 here, that's all you got for the rest of eternity if we leave Christ out. So we've had the appearance of the book, verse 1. We've got the challenge, verse 2, 3, and 4. And we get the victory in verse 5 and 6. And with regard to the victory, we're going to drill that down just a little bit more. We're going to have something about the person. I want to spend a little time on this. The person of the victory, verse 6 and 7, or 5 and 6. And then we're going to have something about what he does. We're going to call it the act. That's verse 7. Okay? The person and the act. Let's start in verse 6 with the person involved. He says, "And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth." All right? So the person involved is linked, that we just saw in verse 6, is linked back to verse 5. So if we link verse 5 and verse 6, we see that Christ in verse 5 is called a lion. John in verse 6 looks and he says, "I see a lamb." So we've got to link those two things together. We've got lamb and we've got lion. Now there is a broad contrast between the two. Can you get any more far apart when you're contrasting two animals, for example? If you take a lion, how close is that to a lamb? No, they're light years apart, aren't they? Right? So you couldn't have any broader contrast between the two. A lion is majestic. The idea of a lion in the Bible is that of rule, of a king, kingdoms. And then a lamb, what is that? Submissive suffering, right? So you've got two different contrasts. The animals are different, right? Just the picture of the animal itself, and then what they represent. So how do they come together? How do we bring together the lion and the lamb? When Christ is viewed as a lamb, the emphasis is on his suffering. Now, why did he suffer? In order to save. Okay, so Christ suffered in order to save. But when we look at him as a lion, the emphasis is on what? It's not saving. What is it on? It's on ruling. It's on reigning. Okay, so when we look at him as a lion, it's on reigning. So what happens is you've got lion and you've got lamb. Both of those give us a total picture of the whole career of Christ. From beginning to end. You go all the way from Bethlehem, all the way in and through the millennial kingdom. The picture goes from lamb to lion. So it gives you a full and complete picture of the whole career of Jesus Christ. At his first advent, Bethlehem, what was there? That was all suffering. That was all suffering. His first advent is all suffering. At his second advent, what are we going to have? Well, he's not coming to suffer this time, is he? He's coming to rule and to reign, yes. All right, so you've got the two advents. You look at his whole career. The first one is to suffer. The second is the reigning. So you've got the suffering lamb. That was the condition. What's the result? The lion, which is reigning, right? Okay, so the condition is suffering. That's pictured in a lamb. And then the result of that is reigning, and that's pictured as a lion. Now, I think we know the concept of the cross has got to precede the crown. Do we understand that concept of suffering before reigning? Okay, just look at it on a simple level that a lot of us understand. In the military, you go in as a private. What's he doing? Running war plans and ordering troops around? No, he's cleaning out the toilets and doing all other kinds of stuff, right? He's got to work his way up. Okay, and that's the same thing. If you want to have if you want a crown, there's got to be some suffering to get to that. Okay? So in life, do we have you ever had any opportunities? You ever had any trials? You ever had any pressures in life? One or two, right? And when we get those things in life, those are opportunities for us. So the pressure comes, there's the suffering, and if I respond right to that, then I get a crown. So you have to understand the concept of cross before the crown. That permeates Scripture. I want you to look over at Luke 24 with me. Luke 24. Luke 24. So here we've got the risen Christ. There's two disciples. They're walking down the road to Emmaus. They're talking amongst each other. They're upset because they thought that Christ was going to come and to take over, get rid of all the Roman oppression and so forth. And in their eyes, what happened to Christ? He died. That was it. It's over. You look at Peter and John and them. What'd they go do? They went back out there. They got their fishing boats out of storage. They got their nets undry rotted, right? And they said, we got to go back to work. I guess this isn't going to happen, right? And so you've got these two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and in Luke 24, look at verse 26. That's a good story, though, if you want to read it. I don't have time. If I started reading all this stuff, you'd all be mad at me. Verse 26, ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter in his glory? So you've got Christ suffering right there. You got it, right? Verse 26, everybody with me? Suffering. That's the Lamb, right? And after he suffers, what happens? Enters into his glory, right? So you got lion and lamb in one verse. See it? Suffering and then glory. Suffering and then crown. And how did he decide to explain that to him? Verse 27. Where'd he go? He said, let's go on back to Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. We'll go to Ruth. We'll go to Samuel. We'll go to Chronicles. We'll go to Kings. I'd also like to take you over here to David and Psalms. I'd like to take you over here to Isaiah and Jeremiah and Lamentations and Ezekiel and Daniel and Zechariah and Malachi and Obadiah and Jonah and all that. I want to take you to all of them because you know who they were talking about? They were talking about him, weren't they? Well, isn't that what he says in verse 27? He says, beginning at Moses, who's that? He got to write the first 5 books. So he said, let's go back to the Pentateuch. I'm going to start there. And then I'm going to go to all the prophets. Who's that? That's everybody else. So I'm going to take you back and we're going to do a little Old Testament survey. And that Old Testament survey is going to talk about who? Look, notice verse 27. He expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. You see it there? Okay, that's so important. Now, notice in Luke 24, verse 26, ought not Christ to have suffered these things? You see the little word and? that doesn't have to be translated and. You can translate it a couple different ways. It's a connector. It's the term kai. Kai can also be translated then. Do you think that might fit better there? Take a look again. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things then? Do you see the sequence of the way things are happening? By the way, does anybody have a translation that picked up on that? You do? Well, you get a pass then, I guess. You're still not as spiritual as me, though, because the king, but that's okay. Now, it's interesting that he gives them a statement up front, then he reinforces it by going back to Moses and the prophets because they spoke of him. They were pointing to the Messiah. By the way, when is the first statement we have about the Messiah in the Bible? Genesis 3, verse 15. Yeah, that's the proto-evangelium. That's the first telling of the good news. That there's going to be one that's going to come. You're going to bruise his heel, Satan, but guess what he's going to do to you? He's going to bruise your head. Which would you rather have bruised? I'll take the heel over the head, right? That's a kill shot. Satan, you have been successful in the garden, but that's going to come to us end real quick. Because somebody's coming, and that's the first telling of the Messiah. So it goes all the way through the Old Testament. The judge of Revelation is the Lamb hanging on the cross. That's the point. That's why we have, and go back to Revelation 5. That's why you've got in verse 5, he says, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. John says, I looked, and he said, I saw a lamb. That's why you've got both of those things coming together, because the judge of Revelation is the same one that was hanging on the cross for us 2,000 years ago. I don't know how long it'll be at this point. So we're reminded of the fact that we are seeing judging activities, and when we're seeing judging activities, who are we talking about in verse 6? The Lamb. Okay, we're looking at Christ two ways. We've got him as a lion and as a lamb. But when we start focusing in on judging activities, he is called a lamb. Okay, he's not called, John says in verse 6, the angel said, hey, or the elder said, hey, you see the Lion of the tribe of Judah? John's getting ready to start spelling out all of the events that are going to start unfolding in Revelation 6. And who does he see before those things start spilling out? Verse 6, he said, I looked and I saw a lamb. And so the lamb is the one that's involved with the judging activities that we're going to start seeing the details of beginning in Revelation chapter 6. Now, the early part of the New Testament associates the lamb with suffering. The early part of the New Testament associates the lamb with suffering. When we close the book out, when we finish up Revelation, the lamb is associated with judging and with reigning. Okay? Everybody following here? Okay. Now, this lamb is described three different aspects with regard to the lamb, okay? So there's three different aspects. The first is, we're going to see in verse 6, him in terms of readiness. So look at his posture. What is he doing in verse 6? And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the four beasts and in the midst of the elders, next word, stood. What's his posture? The lamb is doing what? He is standing. The lamb is standing. Does that mean anything? It does mean something. Are there any implications with that? Think about some implications. If it was just you right now and you had that little bit of information, you got your Bible sitting in front of you, what are some things you might want to jot down? What are some implications that might come out of that? If he's there and he's standing, number one, is the sacrificial work over? Okay, that's done. Okay, sacrificial work is over. The lamb is no longer slain, is he? How does he see him? He says, there stood a lamb, you see it there? As it had been. That's over. Okay, so this slaining part, that is something that is already done. So the lamb at this point is no longer slain. He has already been slain. What is he doing right now? He is standing. Does that imply anything? I'm just trying to get us to think for just a minute, and I do apologize. Okay, he was slain. Thumbs up? Okay, he was slain. He's standing. Got it? Okay, he's standing. Is he dead or not? What's implied in this now? The resurrection, right? So what's implied in the fact that you've got one that was slain, and now he's standing there looking to do something. He's not dead any longer, so it implies the resurrection. The resurrection is implied here in chapter 5. Don't you love to see those little nuggets in there? They're just sprinkled in there. The Holy Spirit, when he writes the book, he just sprinkles them all in there. Scatters the seed because they're everywhere. I want to compare that to Hebrews 1. Look at that with me. We'll come right back to Revelation. Look at Hebrews 1. Sometimes I get somebody might tell me, well, I'm reading this book. That's great. That's good. But take some time and look at the details. Take a paragraph and look at the details. Dissect it. Look at the words. You've got more tools at your disposal now than at any time during the whole history of mankind for a Bible study. And they're all free. You get it, doesn't cost you a thing. Look at the details. There's so many nuggets that are there. Hebrews 1:3, we're going to compare this. Remember this. Revelation is all pictures. It's pictures, and they all mean something. Pictures have literal meaning. But we need to understand what the pictures are. Hebrews 1, verse 3. Who being in the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person and upholding all things by the word of his power. What happened? What did he do? He purged our sins, right? That's done. So once he had by himself purged our sins. Are the sins purged? Okay, that's done. So what did he do? Sat down. What does that mean? He was tired? It's a picture that's showing what? Work's done. I don't have any more work to do. You come over to Revelation 5, what's he doing? He's standing. We got to do some work now. See the difference? Okay. So in Hebrews, you've got him sitting, and the emphasis with sitting is the work is complete. Standing indicates what? Time to get to work. There's activity that needs to be done, and it's emphasizing the work that is getting ready to be done. By the way, after he's done working, he's got some more work to do. It's going to start in chapter 6, and it's going to finish up in chapter 19 when he comes back. Remember? When he's done, what does he do in chapter 20? He's going to go sit back down. The work's done. He's going to sit on his throne. You see? Okay. So he's standing. Where is he standing? Verse 6. In the midst of the elders, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, right? So in the midst of the throne is where Christ is standing. So does that say anything? Whose throne are we talking about? Talking about the Father's. Remember, we've got three people here. One God. We need to make sure we know who we're talking about here. Okay, so this is the throne of God the Father. Not only was he raised, we already got that, because he's standing, he's alive. He was slain, not anymore. not only is he standing there, and we know that he's raised because that's implied in that, but I want you to understand that with him standing in the midst of the throne of God the Father, that tells us that he was accepted or approved. See, that's all in there. The Father didn't say, he's not standing there at the throne. The Father doesn't look at him and say, hey, you didn't finish up. You need to get back down there. He's accepted. He's approved. Now, let's do a little exercise. We've gone through the book of Romans. Most of you in this room have gone through it with me. The first 11 chapters. And we've had a lot of things thrown at us, right? Justification, sanctification, glorification. Within justification, there's so many things like redemption and reconciliation and all those things, right? We've been bought. We've been brought back to the Father. So if he's here standing in the midst of the throne, and we understand the things that have come out of Romans, which tell us the truth about who we are in Christ, can you think of a word with Christ standing at the throne of the Father as one that's already slain and raised from the dead and accepted? Can you think of a word that will cover that? Do you remember that word, propitiation? Christ, in his ascension back to the Father, he did what the high priest did year after year after year in bringing the blood and applying it to the mercy seat or the propitiation place in the Holy of Holies. That is where the Father was satisfied. We had to do it again. They had to do it again a year later, but that satisfied him to where they could have fellowship with him for that year, then they would do it again. What Christ did is he went to the mercy seat up at the Father's throne and brought his blood there. And he's standing in the midst of that throne where God the Father is, and that shows that God has been satisfied. There's nothing else that needs to be done. Or, I'll put it on the candy shelf. If you were to take your last breath tonight and you've put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, or how about this? You've been satisfied like the Father's been satisfied with Christ's work on your behalf, you're going to the same place. So he's standing. That shows he's ready for action. That's his posture. Now, there's some completeness here. Look at the completeness of his sacrifice. Verse 6. As it had been slain. Why does he say as in verse 6? Because he's not now. He was, but he's not. So I'm looking at him. It looks like he's been, but he's not anymore. So he's not slain now. He was. But what does he still have? He still has the appearance. He still has the appearance of one that had been slain, right? So he has the appearance of one that's been slain, but he's alive. I want you to go over to John 20. John 20. Do you know that Revelation, we're going to John 20, Revelation is the only place where the death of Christ is viewed as a slaughter. Do you know that? So Revelation is the only place in the Bible that views the death of Christ as a slaughter. Isaiah 53 gets real close. Isaiah 52 says that we looked on him and we couldn't even tell he was a man because he was beaten so bad. Gets real close to calling it a slaughter, but Revelation is the only book that calls the death of Christ a slaughter. You see, here's the deal. The marks of death remain. The marks of death remain. So in John 20, verse 26, he's been to the cross, he's been in the tomb, he's out of the tomb. So we're looking at a situation here post-resurrection. So you remember you got old doubting Thomas. Thomas, he missed Sunday school one Sunday, and so he had to come back next week. So he missed it. He didn't get a chance to see the resurrected Christ. They were telling him the story. He said, unless I see it myself and reach my hand in his side, I'm not going to believe it. And Jesus was shocked. He said, oh, what? No. He came back next week, and notice what he said, John chapter 20, verse 26. And after 8 days, see there? Been over a week. After 8 days, again, his disciples were within and Thomas with them. Thomas said, I'm not missing anymore. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and he said, peace be unto you. Then he said, I got to deal with Thomas real quick. Hang on. Thomas, come here. Reach hither your finger, behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand and thrust it into my side. And will you stop not believing? He said, I want you to stop being faithless. Rather, will you turn it into belief? And if it takes reaching into my side and putting your hands in my holes and all that stuff, just go ahead. Verse 29, and Thomas started reaching his hands inside of him. And did he do that? Now, that's important because a lot of times we say, well, man, if I could, I'd believe too. Thomas didn't have to do that. This is all this is after the resurrection of Christ. And the thing to point out is here you are, he's with the disciples in bodily form after the resurrection. Are the marks there or not? They're not scars. We got to stop calling them scars. He said, reach your hand in the hole. Okay? Those are the marks of the fact that he has been slain. The marks are still there. By the way, and go back to Revelation 5, the word slain is in the perfect tense. Present tense, ongoing action. Aorist tense, event after event. Perfect tense is a completed action, and the results of that abide forever. Okay? Slain, verse 6 of chapter 5 of Revelation, I looked and stood a lamb as it had been slain, had been slain. That is a completed action with abiding results. And the word slain is the word sphadzo. Sphadzo doesn't mean slain. It means, you can use it two ways. You can say butchered or slaughtered. That's how you translate sphadzo. That's what he says in verse 6. I looked and I saw a lamb, and it looked like he'd been butchered. So that's the completeness of his sacrifice. How about his power, verse 6? Notice we've got some strange stuff coming up here. Having 7 horns, you see it? And 7 eyes, you got the picture? Which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. Seven horns and 7 eyes. You got to be real careful here. The reason I say be careful is, what do you do with this monstrosity? Can you close your eyes and picture a lamb butchered, 7 horns? Where do you put them? Shoulder, back, legs, feet, knees, head, cheeks? Where do you put them? Is that the point? No. Where do you put the eyes? You line them up right across the forehead, go all the way around? Is that what you do? A lot of artists have painted him that way. But by the way, the artist, when they paint him, he's not butchered. He's got some scars. That's about it. And then we've got the horns neatly arranged, and then the eyes running all the way around the head. The point is that's not what the writer wants you to think about. Because if we think about this lamb, it looks like he's been butchered, and we got 7 horns, we've got 7 eyes. It's nothing but ridiculous. It really is. And I don't mean that in a not reverential way. I don't mean that way at all. I'm saying if we spend our time trying to paint a picture of what this looks like, it's going to look ridiculous. Won't it? Yeah. And what does it do? If we're going to put all of our time into that, what does that do? It takes us away from the truth that's being taught. Okay? So the room, Revelation 4 and 5, when you look at the throne room, that whole scene in Revelation 4 and 5, listen here, is not a description it is not a graphic description of heaven. Let that sink in for just a minute. Because he says in verse 1, he says there's a door open. He says, come up here. And I looked in, and here it is. I'm in heaven. Revelation 4 and 5 is not a graphic description of heaven. It is symbolic. It is symbolic. In other words, remember, you got the throne, but it wasn't set. It was coming in. You think when you get to heaven, you're going to see some mobile thrones? You think you're going to see a lamb with horns on their head and all that? No. The idea is we've got symbolism here. We don't want to attempt to visualize a 7-horned, 7-eyed butchered lamb. If you do that in this book, you're going to end up trapped by monstrous pictures. You're just going to be weighed down by that. And don't let yourself do that when you work through this book. These people that wrote in the first century, they could care less about the visual. They didn't care what it looked like. That's why you've got these pictures that are kind of weird to us. They said, hey, we want the lamb. We want him to be, as he's been butchered. And I want to show that he's got all power. And what did they say? Stick 7 horns on him. 7's complete, horns are power. Okay, 7 horns. That's it. Okay, 7 horns. That's the picture. And the truth that's being taught is I want you to understand that he is powerful. It's the idea of power. So put 7 horns on him. I want to also convey the idea that he has supreme intelligence. Well, how are we going to do that? I don't know. Oh, I got it. Throw 7 eyes on him. Okay, so don't focus on the picture. What's the picture teaching? The message is what's the point. All right, that's what's the point. So what's involved here? Horns. In the Bible, horns are always aggressive power. Horns are always aggressive power. I'm going to give you a couple passages. I don't have time to go to them. You go look at them if you want to. Deuteronomy 33:17. Deuteronomy 33:17. Horns, aggressive power. These are just sample passages. You also got it in Zechariah 1:18 and 19. You say, well, where's Zechariah? Go to Matthew, back up 2 books. All right? Remember Malachi? It's the last book of the Old Testament. It's the one right before that. He's right next door. And then in Revelation 5:6, you've got the same thing. And then you put the 7 with it, and that gives you the idea of completeness. All right? So complete power. How about eyes? Complete intelligence. Go look at it. Go look at it when you have time. We've already looked at this 100 times. Isaiah 11, 1, 2, and 3. You remember the picture of the Holy Spirit? I saw the Spirit, and who was he? He gives them 7 different things, which is talking about the completeness or the fullness of the Holy Spirit. All right, so eyes is emphasizing complete intelligence because there's 7 of them. Okay, everybody understand? Okay. I don't want you to think, I'm reading Revelation 4 and 5, and then when I die, this is what it's going to look like. That's not the picture he's painting, okay? So the message to summarize, Jesus is the only person with the basis for dealing with sin. If you don't already know that, you should write it down. He's the only person to lay the basis for dealing with sin. Notice verse 6, he's slain. He was slain. That's the basis. He's the only one that's got the power for dealing with sin, 7 horns. And he's the only one that has the intelligence for dealing with sin, 7 eyes. In other words, he's the only one that can deal with sin. Do we need sin dealt with? Yeah, desperately, don't we? Okay, so he's the only one that can do it. So the issue's been, verse 3, There's nobody that's got the basis, there's nobody that's got the power, and there's nobody that's got the wisdom to do it. Verse 4, what's the result? Weeping sets in. Verse 5, who steps up? The Lamb walks through the door. Okay? The Lamb walks in, and when he steps in, he pictures himself in terms of his cross. I looked, and here's a lamb that looks like he'd been slain. So there he dealt with sin at the cross. Everybody okay there, I hope. Okay. So he dealt with sin at the cross. His power, got 7 horns. He's able to put sin down. His intelligence, 7 eyes. He's going to do it with perfect righteousness. All right? By the way, it's all good news. Okay. You see, its power is intelligently used, and he's the only one qualified to do it because he's the one that died. He's the only one in the whole universe qualified to do it. They say, I don't know, don't really care, but they say there's millions of light years out there. How far is that? That's a good little ways, right? You go millions of light years in all 4 directions. Who are you going to come up with? Nobody. There's just one. There's just one. He's the only one in the whole universe. So that's the person that's involved. Now, what does he do, verse 7? What's his act? He came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat on the throne. Notice the drama. John is very careful to write it out in great detail. What does it say? Verse 7, he says, the Lamb says, here, throw it here. No, you see the drama? He says, he came, he went over there to him, and what did he do? He took the book out of where? Could he have left that out? He could have, but he didn't, so there must be a reason why he left it in. You remember what right hand shows? That's the hand of the Father. So whoever comes and takes this can do what the Father can do. So he took it out of his right hand. Are we talking about equality here? Sameness and equality at the same time? Okay. Just seeing if y'all following me here. So he comes, he takes it. In what role? In what role, verse 6? As the Lamb. Think of it this way. I might want to write this down. The cross is the title deed to the world. The cross is the title deed to the world. That's what qualifies him to take the book and to execute judgment. He's qualified to execute judgment. Now notice, in taking the scroll from the Father, he assumes what? I just told you. What does he assume? When he takes the scroll from the Father, he assumes ability to do what the Father can do. That would tell us something else. Remember, you got a lot of things that are kind of hidden in here, little gems. That talks about the fact that Christ is equal in nature to the Father. The hand of God speaks of the omnipotence of God. So the one that is able and worthy to take the scroll out of the hand of the one that's omnipotent also is what? Omnipotent. They both are omnipotent. One God, 3 people, 3 persons, right? 3 distinct persons. Notice the Father doesn't say, well, hang on, I'm not sure. Before you take it, let me make sure. No, he releases the scroll in verse 8. And when he had taken the book, what does that imply? He turned it loose, didn't he? So when he had taken the book, that means he turned it loose. You know, this has got to be one of the most sublime scenes. It really does. It's got to be one of the most sublime scenes in the whole Bible. When all hope is lost, verse 3 and 4. When all hope is lost in verse 3 and 4, notice what you get in verse 7 and 8. And he came, took the book out of the right hand of him that sat on the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders, they fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And you go from the act of taking the scroll to the praise. Notice who participates in verse 8. Who's participating? Yeah, we're back to the 4 beasts and the 24 elders, right? The 24 elders. That's who's participating. We identified the beasts as angelic beings, the cherubim. The 24 elders are the church. So what do you have? In heaven, in verse 8, you have the joining of man and angel in worship. Notice they didn't in verse 9 and 10. The cherubim worshiped, and the church was sitting there going, well, I guess we all do that too, verse 9 and 10. Here, verse 8 of chapter 5, they join in together in worship. Look with me real quick, and I'll be done in just a minute, okay? Promise? Matthew 6. We don't have to turn here because most of you know it. Matthew 6. This has been called the Lord's Prayer, right? It's not. It's the model prayer. Lord's Prayer is John 17. So here's the model prayer, but I want you to see what the Lord prays. Verse 9, Matthew 6. After this manner, therefore, pray this way. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. How? In earth. How? Okay. Has that happened yet? Has not happened yet, right? Okay, so that little phrase, on earth just like it is in heaven, how does Revelation end up? Revelation ends up with an answer to this prayer. Things on earth are just like they are in heaven. That's going to come. That's going to come. They've been realized. Revelation ends up with the words of Christ here in Matthew 6 as having been, they end up that way. Put it this way. What's going on in heaven right now will eventually become the scene of earth. Amen. Do I need to repeat that? You got it? Notice also in verse 8, we've got to go back to, let me finish this out real quick. I want you to catch something important here. Revelation 5, verse 8. We've been doing praise all wrong. What instruments do we have? Harps. No, I'm just kidding. You know I am. Maybe. Harps are beautiful, aren't they? What's the most common praise combo in the Old Testament? Song and harp. That's the most common praise combo in the Old Testament is song and harp. I'll give you one example. Look at it later. Psalm 33:2. Song and harp. That's one example of many. Song and harp. How many are involved? Verse 11. Here's what I want you to get before you leave, okay? And I beheld and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. It's about, I think that's the same as our national debt. How many are involved in verse 11? It's a bunch, isn't it? What I want you to not lose sight of is, what do you normally lose with bigness? Several years ago, we were in a situation where we were going to outgrow our church building. And so everybody wanted to talk to me about it, and they said, well, we need to get 2 services going. I said, then you need to find somebody else. Because I'm not doing 2 services. I don't want 2 churches. I just want pastor 1. And when you start having a bunch of people come in, you got this service and you got this one and this going, everything's going on in different directions. You just lost the idea of what true fellowship is. Okay. So I'm absolutely not interested in that. But I want you to understand that while there is this hugeness in verse 11 of chapter 5, I want you to understand something here. There's also individuality. Verse 8. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having, next 2 words, every single one of them had an instrument, namely a harp. So you've got this idea, in verse 11 tells you there's thousands, 10,000s, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, and guess what? Every one of them's got their own instrument, and every one of them is playing first chair. Notice also in verse 8, golden vials of odors. Now that just takes the ear right back to the Old Testament, doesn't it? Priestly service is the burning of incense. Odors is incense, and it's plural. It might be plural for a couple different reasons, that there's a lot of them, or it might be plural because there's a lot of variety. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Might be both. I don't know. But what is incense? Verse 8. Prayers of the saints. What can you say about that? I want you to write this down, okay? I want you to think about this week. Prayer on earth is incense in heaven.
Did you think that up by yourself?
All by myself.
That's good.
Prayer on earth, I didn't think it up. He says it in verse 8, doesn't he? He says it. Isn't that what he says? No, I don't read books and all that stuff, and don't like the internet, so this is... Prayer, when we pray, you just lit some incense in heaven. Is there any application of that? Anything? Come on now, think with me. Here's the implication, or application, however you want to look at it. Did I make heaven fragrant today or not? Psalm 122 talks about that if you want to look. Let's take a minute to pray together. There's a lot of folks to pray for. We want to remember Bill. He's going to have surgery.